Hello and welcome to the Opening Bell, the boxing news podcast. Tris Dixon is not available for duties today, so we've got the always willing John Dennen alongside me, which is always fun. Let's start off, quite a few things to talk about. Let's start off with the world title fight you attended at the weekend, and people feared the worst when it was announced, in that people questioned the quality for a world title fight, and it was Stuey Hall against Martin Ward, and through no fault of the competitors, it was a bit of an anticlimax, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a huge anticlimax. It just ended before it even got going because heads collided. Martin Ward had bad cuts, and so it had to be stopped barely into the second round. So it was a technical draw, leaving everyone pretty deflated by the whole thing. I spoke to Stuey after the fight. He was, especially gutted because he wanted to sort of make a statement. He was confident in getting the knockout. He wanted to sort of get a good win. He's from Darlington, so it's a sort of an all northeast world title fight. So big in that part of the world, but it doesn't really. It looked bad, I suppose, that there was some criticism for what were Martin Ward's credentials as a world title challenger. He is sort of, and he hasn't even won the British title, and then for it to end in, not farcical, but to end over, so soon, without even a conclusive result was, frustrating for everyone involved.
Yeah, I mean, you simply go out certainly to the fighters involved. I mean, there's something interesting that Stuey Hall said in a piece that you put on the website yesterday, in that, he only fought for 2 rounds, and, on paper it was an easy night, but I went through a whole training camp for that. But also, something else that I think you have to consider is the crowd. I mean, what was the mood like when that was stopped in the second round amongst the crowd, who had obviously paid over a fair bit of cash to go along to see a world title fight? Yeah,
it was. It wasn't received well, but it wasn't like everyone. It wasn't like a riot broke out, but it was just very flat atmosphere sort of after that. But what can anyone say? These things happen, I suppose. It's one of the risks, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. You've been to a few world title fights now in your time, John.
Well, I do what I can.
Talk about it. Just before that happened in the second round, just compare the atmosphere of Stuey Hall versus Martin Ward to some of the other world title fights you've been to.
I suppose the one before that I was at the Ricky Burns world title fight in Glasgow.
Yeah.
So that was, sort of arenas of similar size, but in Glasgow it was packed with like 10,000 people, and I think Newcastle was laid out for a few thousand people, and it was never full. You could always see empty seats. It wasn't a bad atmosphere. There are a fair few there, but like on Burns' night in Glasgow, it was, a great atmosphere, as he was sort of processing to the ring. Then when Crawford started outboxing him, it got pretty quiet. I think the world title fight before that, what was before that? Barker Sturm in Germany. Sturm always puts on a good show, but again, that was another fight that ended very quickly, through an injury. But that, Sturm, he sort of, his entrance, he was sort of mined his way to the ring or something. It was pretty spectacular. Before that, I was at Froch Groves. That was pretty intense.
Yeah. Go on.
Before that, I was at Bradley Marquez in Las Vegas. Right. And again, before the way they staged that, you were sat there thinking, this is actually going to be a really great fight. It was an interesting fight, not, it wasn't Hagler Hearns.
Well, were you Hagler Hearns as well, were you?
No, but they played it on the TV screen, so I felt like I was there. I can't remember, my memory goes blank before that. I was at the Olympic Games. Should I talk about that for a bit?
Go on.
Anyway, I want to hear about you, man. Tell me about yourself.
Oh, we can't start that here. We can't start that here. Let's stick with Stuey Hall for a while.
Fair enough.
Now, I've heard something this morning that Stuey Hall has kind of been a bit tight-lipped about who he wants to fight next. He understandably wants to go on a holiday and everything else. But there's some talk that he's going to be involved in a unification fight with Anselmo Marino. What do you make of that for Stuey Hall?
You know, because he did say in the interview that after his next defence he wants to go for a unification. How great that would be. It was originally hard enough to imagine Stuey as a world champion, let alone a unified world champion. He is looking. He is looking sort of strong. And I think he is improving. And he certainly, he didn't, in the round it lasted, he looked powerful, didn't rush anything. And you can make a case for him in that, his fight to win the title was a great, heart-warming performance. His ranking fight, again, sort of got him in the, winning a sort of minor IBF belt, sort of got him in the right place. I think what's muddied the waters for him in terms of being respected as a world champion is that Jamie McDonnell was stripped. And that he fought for a vacant title, so I think that's what sort of prompted people to criticise him, even though that's not his fault. He just took his chance. If I was his advisor, I wouldn't be desperate to see him rush off to a unification battle, and I don't know how that would work with his mandatory is being decided in an eliminator this Friday. Yeah. So I was under the impression that the unification fight would have to be after he defends against his mandatory. Yeah. But I suppose it takes him away from those domestic rivals like McDonnell, who we mentioned. Paul Butler's an easy fight to make, but I don't think Stewie's that bothered about it.
No, he didn't seem to have that many kind words for Paul Butler.
Yeah, nor Lee Haskins. This year seems to be a year for all British fights that are proving popular. But in purely sporting terms, maybe if he wants to test himself against the best, maybe he needs to go overseas.
Interesting time for Stuey Hall. Yeah, I think we do have to give him, like you allude to, we do need to give him some credit. And anybody that's spoken to Stuey Hall, really, he's a nice guy, and more power to him for what he's achieved, because it doesn't happen that often in boxing. Also in action at the weekend was a light heavyweight, Sergey Kovalev. He kind of did what was expected against perhaps pluckier Cedric Agnew. Mine went blank then. Who went into the 7th round. Some people were tipping an earlier stoppage, but Agnew went into that unbeaten. Kovalev got rid of him. Never looked in danger. But the fight that we thought we were going to get, that looked like it was on the cards, was obviously Kovalev-Stevenson. Now, the whole TV network issue in America, they're now pledged their loyalties to different TV networks over there, and it looks like that fight's not going to happen. How much of a miss is that for boxing, John?
Yeah, it's a big miss. You need the big fights, and when both Kovalev and Stevenson with HBO, you thought that made sense, and then it seemed they got another sort of tune-up bout before it. Kovalev did, and then suddenly it's all fallen apart. I don't know why these things happen, but it's not good, is it? Sort of the obvious thing is to make the biggest fights with the best people in the divisions, and Kovalev-Stevenson would have been a great fight for boxing. It's a bit of a blow. Well, it's a real blow that it's not happening.
It's nothing new in boxing, is it, that these fights fall through? But each time that something like this happens in the sport, and okay, let's not write it off just yet, but we've seen this go on before. We've seen this process happen before. Me personally, it's getting increasingly hard to take, and you can see why some of the older guys that have been around that have been covering the sport ringside for so many years are a little bit bitter about certain things, because This is damaging the sport when this consistently is allowed to happen. All I'm going to ask of you, John, is a solution.
Just put me in charge. In theory, if you had one governing body with, and so you didn't have the WBCs and WBOs of this world, if you had one governing body who did their own ranking system, and ideally it was transparent, and you had one world title, eventually either fighting for that world title in a division or to get to it, the top boxers would have to fight one another. Right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's sorted.
Case closed.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not going to happen, is it?
No.
Because the sort of, the world title bodies are so well in place, and promoters, have relationships with different TV networks. Yeah. But I suppose in theory, is that that's what UFC is. It's not necessarily good to have a monopoly, because UFC has sort of the top end of MMA sewn up. They can put the best guys in with each other. In football, there's one World Cup, isn't there? And everyone, so the best team's going to play each other. In tennis, they have 4 majors, but everyone goes in them, so everyone, all the best do play against each other. Why can't we do that?
To me, it's the most infuriating thing in the sport, is that the best don't fight the best, and so often now it seems to be happening that these fights are falling through, and it is a real shame. It really is.
I suppose you have to be glad for the good fights we do get. At least Frampton Groves are fighting. Mayweather, Pacquiao, Bradley is a good fight, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good fight, but it's not the best fight to be made. Frampton Groves, when that was made, there were better fights to be made. Bradley Provodnikov, when that was made, it wasn't thought that was going to be a great fight, but because of the nature of boxing, now and again you're going to get fireworks, and these great fights occur. But what I would really like to see happen,
order into chaos.
Well, yes, but let's have a fight that we expect is going to be great, to actually go through. Let's enjoy the build-up. Let's get excited about it. Let their fight then deliver. And let's get excited about boxing. The boxing is a wonderful, wonderful sport. It's a great spectacle. I don't know.
Do we have to blame the boxers as well as the promoters and the TV companies? Because if a fighter says, I'm fighting this guy,
you would think
is it going to happen? So do we have to blame Stevenson for not, or at least give them a portion of the blame for not saying that this is the fight for me?
I think everybody's to blame. I think everybody's to blame.
Because say, for example, when I was talking to Stuey Hall, obviously, small, to a small degree compared to those other major fights. When he was talking about Jamie McDonnell, he was saying that's the fight I want. But the politics, obviously, he's sort of bound to Box Nation, McDonnell's with Sky and Matchroom. He's saying with the politics, I just think it's too hard to make. But if should it be the case that if he says, "All right, I really want this," then it's going to happen?
Well, ultimately, I think the fighters are perhaps less to blame, or in that they will sign a contract with someone, and if they're getting paid and they know how this works. Yeah. They say, for example, in America, someone signs to Showtime. They're not going to start constantly wasting their time calling out a HBO fighter, because they know really that it's not going to happen. They know that that's a situation that's kind of been created, and they then exist within that.
And they'll want to honour the contract they have.
Exactly.
So if they've committed to whatever TV channel it is, they'll I suppose they'd want to stay with that rather than going off for another fight.
But I do think the vast majority of fighters being fighters, will fight whoever is put in front of them, and naturally they all want to fight the best. But ultimately money talks, and it always has done. moving on, this week, something that caught my eye, you just mentioned that you haven't, just before we kind of started recording, you mentioned you hadn't read it yet.
Well, I've had stuff on, Matt. I've been busy.
It wasn't a criticism, John. It wasn't a criticism. You know, I'm about to start talking about an Andy Lee feature that's in this week's issue. Excellent job by Elliot Wurzel, who spent quite a lot of time with Andy Lee since he's been with Adam Booth. But the essence of the feature is kind of the ghost of Emmanuel Stewart that is still there for Andy Lee. And I'm not sure if we've spoke about it on the podcast, but I remember Andy Lee when he was coming through, and he was quite heavily hyped on ESPN at the time, and there was a feature of Andy Lee, and I believe he was at Emmanuel Stewart's house, because I know he lived with Emmanuel Stewart for a long time. And it was a really interesting feature. This is going back, I would, top of my head, say 2006, 2007. Was
this before he lost to Brian Vera?
It was not long before.
Yeah.
I think it may even have been
in the build-up
to that fight when he lost to Brian Vera, which was a massive upset. But I remember Emmanuel Stewart saying that Andy Lee was, you know, one of the. He could win a world middleweight title after about 9 or 10 fights, and Andy Lee for a while looked like a fantastic prospect, exposed slightly against Brian Vera. First of all, I would advise anybody who's got a passing interest to get a copy and read that, because there's some really interesting stuff, some real good insight about what life was like under Manny Stewart, but there's also some really nice stuff about the respect that Adam Booth has got for Manny Stewart as well, and their first fight together as well, some of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, really good stuff there. But Andy Lee, John, you've spoke to him a few times, is friend of Boxing News, real gentleman, always great to talk to. Golovkin is kind of making, well, it looks like that Golovkin is going to move up and fight Julio Cesar Chavez. We'll talk about that in a second. But so where does that leave Andy Lee? Is he a potential world titleist at middleweight?
Yeah, I think he is. Obviously, he lost to Chavez, but that, it was almost a creditable defeat, and that Chavez was so big and just kept coming, and the punches bounced off him, even though Lee can hit quite hard. He is a potential world titleist, and maybe probably gets hit a little bit too often, but he is skillful. He can bang, and he should be popular. An Irish middleweight. He doesn't like that. It's just middleweight seems a pretty strong division at the moment, but Stone would have his hands full with Andy Lee, wouldn't he? Yeah,
but you say it is a strong division, but it's a strong division because we still consider, and rightly we still consider, Golovkin as a middleweight. But if Golovkin moves up to super middleweight, you would imagine he won't be coming back down. You've got the June 7th showdown between Sergio Martinez, Miguel Cotto. Both of those you wouldn't imagine have more than 2 or 3 fights left in them, whoever wins that one. And then you've got Felix Sturm, another veteran. Is there a revolution? Is there a new dawn approaching at middleweight? And if so, who will lead it?
It's a great question.
That just came to me.
Exactly. It must be. It must be at hand. It's coming soon. Sort of a changing of the guard.
Yeah.
I don't know who the sort of. I think Golovkin, with Sergio Martinez aging, Golovkin is the outstanding middleweight at the moment. When he moves on, I'm not sure if there's going to be someone to be a clear number one, but that almost makes the division more interesting because there are lots of, there are lots of contenders for titles. Sort of Peter Quillen's still got the WBO. Lucas Konechny isn't a great opponent for him. I'd much rather see him against the likes of Andy Lee and Matthew Macklin.
Yeah.
But there's some great middleweight matchups there. I'm not sure who would be left standing at the head of the pack. Sturm for me is probably third behind Martinez and Golovkin, and then Quillen by virtue of being a titleist. But Quillen needs to be with some more demanding opponents.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a mixed forecast. to continue your weather metaphor or atmospheric metaphor.
Okay,
cloudy.
So let's move on to what we discussed. The Julio Cesar Chavez Gennady Golovkin, which looking like it will take place at super middleweight. Already there has been there's rumours and strong rumours that if Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. comes in overweight, he will have to pay $1 million fine, which kind of says it all about what Chavez has done in the past. That to me is a good fight. I like the sound of that. I much prefer that to say Chavez against Andre Ward. Chavez, would you give him any chance in that fight?
But, Golovkin's not a massive middleweight, is he? And Chavez is probably he's just how big? Is he going to want to just pay $1 million and come in with a gigantic size advantage?
203 pounds.
So it is a good fight. I think the size will be the key for Chavez, but Golovkin will probably, Golovkin's a beast, isn't he? He'll box his head off.
Yeah, I think so. I think they should make it a million.
Hopefully not literally.
No, that would be a side, wouldn't it? Sorry, we've lost.
Sorry, I panicked you there.
Lost my train of thought. Yeah,
Golovkin does that to people.
Blind panic.
But Andre Ward has got to fight someone. But if Golovkin beats Chavez, then Golovkin Ward's a massive fight.
Exactly. Winner of Froch Groves 2 as well, and then the super middleweight division. Real hotbed again, isn't it?
Yes. But would Golovkin Chavez be for what would that be? Would that be for a title?
I don't think it would be for a title. And some fights don't need titles, do they?
That's true, Meth.
Maybe they could. Maybe they could fight for that vacant John Dennen championship you were describing earlier.
Yeah. All right. I think it needs a catchy name. I'm not sure people are gonna be desperate to win that prize. But it's fine. They can win a little statue of me.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be nice.
Just think about it. Okay. And then does that mean James DeGale can get in the mix, so he can get his long-awaited shot at the WBC title?
Yes.
Easy for you to say.
Although the thing is, we've got Chavez Jr. at the mandatory there, haven't we?
But if Chavez is busy fighting Golovkin,
yeah.
Can DeGale
WBC? Sakio
is that Beaker? Can DeGale fight Beaker, and then the winner of Chavez Golovkin fights DeGale?
Yeah.
Winner of Froch Groves comes in.
Yeah.
Ward
the
does
John Dennen
something.
Championship is shaping up nicely.
It is. I just need the financial backing of someone.
You're speaking to the wrong person. Don't look at me for financial backing. Okay, moving on to this weekend. Right, we've got some good fights this weekend, some intriguing fights.
Right, ABA Championships are starting in London.
We'll move on. Let's start with
Luke Saunders, Carol
let's start with the ABA Championships. I must admit, my knowledge of amateur boxing far inferior to yours. Talk us through it.
Stuff's going to happen. What is the?
Don't blind me with science.
The early stage of the ABAs are at, as you imply, are a bit of a labyrinth. It is sort of confusing what's going on. So sort of you've got regional stages. London is divided into 4 divisions. Those divisions are being decided this weekend. The winners fight fight through to the London finals. The same applies for the other regions around the country. They'll get less confusing this year when we get to the quarterfinals. That's all being done in a massive event in Liverpool at the end of April. And so like an international tournament, we'll have day after day for 3 days, the quarterfinals, the semi-finals and the finals, boxed without head guards with a new 10 points must scoring system. So that's a big event at the end of the month, and it's just to get to that stage. Some boxes are seeded, sort of the 10 GB internationals are seeded in different weights, so they come in at the quarterfinals. Other boxers have to box through their regions to get there, and so it is a bit of a it is a bit confusing the way it's set out. So like when De Gale fought Groves in the ABAs, that was in the Northwest Divs, right at the early stage. So the new structure means hopefully some of the best guys won't box each other so early on. This is the opposite problem to professional boxing. The best box the best too soon. But that's the great thing about amateur boxing. One of the things I really like about it is the fact that everyone boxes everyone. It doesn't matter, obviously it matters if you lose, but people aren't afraid, people don't protect records. Everyone wants to be in the big championships. So you do actually get a really high standard of boxing, even in sort of, the TA Centre in Grove Park for the Northwest Div finals.
What do you, you mentioned there the new scoring system. Of the amateur boxing that I've been along to and enjoyed kind of the techniques and the actual boxing itself on offer, but have often been left a little perplexed by the scoring at the end of it. What impact can this have on amateur boxing? And I know that amateur boxing has got a huge following, but do you think this could perhaps seduce some that are a little more, like the likes of myself, for example, that are a little more staid in their habits, and they do just see professional boxing as king and ignore the sport at its grassroots level? Do you think the scoring may be able to do that?
I think it does. I think it should make it more accessible. It's sort of easier to get your head around it now, because we're used to that scoring system from the pros. I think people prefer there being no head guards because they can sort of see the faces and it gives more character to it. I actually quite liked the computer scoring system. I liked the way it sort of put a premium on skill, and so power punching in amateur boxing didn't matter. Like a jab, if it landed, was as valuable as a big right hand. I like the fact that it put a premium on sort of speed and skill. I like the fact that if you have the first two rounds are close on the sort of point scoring system, you can be level going into the last round. This way, someone's got to win a round, so the fight can be done and dusted after two. And I didn't really mind about head guards. They sort of, I don't think they have a huge impact on safety, but it's quite good for PR terms. I think parents would prefer to take their kids down an amateur gym thinking, amateur boxing's all right, they wear head guards. But those were just sort of my personal preferences, and I have, I can't deny that there was a lot of criticism of computer scoring, especially by your sort of just casual boxing fans. People didn't like. There was a lot of outcry out, at the Olympics. People didn't like the scoring system there, even though, obviously there was plenty, certain bouts you'd argue with. Overall, I thought it was all right, but I think I was in a minority there. So I think it's better for amateur boxing to have these changes. Okay, no,
that's good. I always applaud an open mind. That's what you have there, John. That's what you've exhibited.
I'm just used to being wrong about stuff.
But speaking about the scoring system, and please, and pardon me if it's an obvious question, but obviously the previous scoring system was all open. Their fighters knew what was going on. Is it with the 10-point must system? Is that going to be all open scoring in terms of the fighters will know what the score is?
I'm not sure how it's going to be displayed. So say at the Olympics with the point scoring system, the scores flash up on TV screens, so you see, but in sort of domestic ABAs, you don't really know the scores till the end.
Right.
So I'm not really sure how it's going to. I just don't think they're going to have TV screens at the London stages.
They won't know whether they're winning or not going into.
Yeah, but with other sort of international things, you do get the scores coming up. I'm just not sure how they're going to sort of stage it, because I haven't seen this year's championships yet. So it is a new system that's coming in. So I think it's going to take a little while for it to bed in.
Speaking about scoring, and before we move on, we've got an interview this week with Mauricio Sulaiman, and there's something that didn't make it into the copy that people will see in their issues this week, but it will be online, is Mauricio Sulaiman and the WBC's take on open scoring in professional boxing, which at the moment they do in 12-round fights. Some of it is scoring which is made where they let the public know, and obviously the corners know what the scores are after 4 and 8 rounds, and then there's a more closed one where it is just the corners that know what the score is. There's been some criticism for that. What's your take on it? I mean, I spoke to Mauricio, and they think it's a wonderful system. They think that it can make a fight more exciting if a fighter knows he's behind. I did pose the question, well, you know, is there an argument then to make the scores public after every round, including the 11th round? Because obviously a lot can go on in the 8th to the 12th. What's your take on it?
I'm not. You know, some people really think is a bad thing and changes the complexion of a fight. I'm not particularly opposed to it. You know, certainly from what we were just saying, you know, in the amateurs when they used to show you the scores after a round, I didn't feel that made it less dramatic. Though it did sort of change about when someone knows they've got to do, you know, what they've been doing hadn't been working for that round. It would make it different. You would lose that sort of moment of tension waiting for the result, which is boxing is one of the few sports you don't know what the result is going to be.
Yeah.
When it ends.
It is, yeah, historically that's the way it's been, and Sullivan was saying that the reason they don't do it before the final round is that a lot of fans have said that they like that drama, that moment when the final bell has sounded, and then you've got those moments where if it's been a close, even sometimes if it hasn't been a close fight, you're not quite sure what's about to happen when the scores are read out. But you mentioned, but one of the arguments for it is that the fighters don't know if they've done enough, if they've been doing enough. Is that right in sport? It is surely the only sport where we don't know what's going on. Is that right? Should a fighter not have that information to know if what he's doing is enough, and if it's not, then he needs to change it?
Some performance type sports like gymnastics or figure skating, you don't know the result to the end. Yeah, but in a way, boxing, you know, those are subjective things, aren't they?
Yeah.
And we have that element of subjectivity in boxing. It's sort of a performance that is judged essentially by the judges. But yeah, I'd agree. So it is. It's not an unprecedented thing to have. But
okay. In a sport where you're competing against another in a one-on-one kind of, you know, where it's a team against a team or it's a one-on-one event, you will know who's winning, won't you?
Yeah.
Apart from boxing.
And that doesn't make it less dramatic. I don't think. Maybe, you know, I think in boxing it'll probably add, you know, another nuance to it. Like, you know, if something's not working, they're going to have to change.
Yeah.
And also the crowd can voice their displeasure at the scores as well. And I think, you know, I suppose my instinct would be to lean towards something that's more open and more transparent. That would probably add further pressure and more scrutiny on the judges, and maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't hurt Tony Thompson when he beat Solis, did it? Because he was with the open scoring, he realised he was behind.
Yeah, exactly, and he did up his game. He did up his game.
So it might, you know, it could help a fighter who should be winning, and if they're not getting the rounds, they'll have to push it even harder. It maybe hope when that situation will stop them from coasting. But then I suppose what the flip side is, if someone thinks they're miles ahead, they could sit back. But that's, you know, that's a recipe for disaster, right? In any sport you do, if you take your foot off your gas just because you think you're too far ahead.
Exactly.
So let's open it up. Let's see everything.
Let's see it all. Transparency is the way forward.
You could have more judges, because I think the new amateur system has sort of 5, you know, at the international level. Again, the ABAs in England haven't started yet, so I haven't seen how they're going to do it. But internationally, they're meant to have like 5 judges and at random pick 3 to get the score, like that way. Sort of how they, you know, it sort of mirrors how they average scores to get points.
Right.
Which you know isn't bad.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so we feel like we've really covering some ground.
I know. I've got all day, Math.
Okay, so let's keep going through a few other bits and bobs to talk about, which I was going to talk about before you mentioned the ABAs, and you know, I'm glad you did.
Blew your mind with that, man.
Yeah, you did.
Hit you with a curveball.
Right,
we could talk about other random stuff. Sahara and sand in the sky.
Let's talk about Carl Frampton. Big fight for him this weekend. Perhaps the final hurdle against Julio Cesar, very capable veteran in an eliminator. The prize for the victor, we're told, will be a shot at Leo Santa Cruz. We spoke about this last week, I think, in that this is the kind of fight that you have to go through in order to get that world title shot, or you usually have to go through to get a world title shot. Historically, you would go through. Cazares, been there, done it. Most would argue he's on the slide. Do you see an upset?
I don't, but that doesn't mean it's not a good fight. Cazares is, he's a good opponent for this type of fight, isn't he? The sort of, the gateway to a world title shot. So, Frampton's got to be the favourite, especially in Belfast with that great crowd behind him. But it's a good solid fight.
Has with the Barry McGuigan connections and everything else, there almost has been this sense around Carl Frampton since he turned professional. It's almost a given that he's going to win a world title. Is there too much expected of Carl Frampton at this stage, and throughout his career so far, or is the hype justified?
Well, it's good that there's this excitement behind him, that he seems on a path to a world championship fight. It's going to be hard to win the title against Leo Santa Cruz, or indeed, there are a lot of top super bantamweights out there as well. And he has, on the way up, he hasn't, he's the win over Kiko Martinez was a great win when you think that Martinez is, went on to win a world title. But he's had his ropey moments. Robbie Turley gave him a hard time.
I was there for that fight.
So nobody's perfect, and everyone's going to have their hard fights. But so far, he's sort of justifying the hype because he's looked, very good in his recent performances as well. And someone who's got, who's got not just got a buzz about him in terms of how his performances are being judged, but also a buzz in people turning out to watch him fight. That's a good thing to see. So I wouldn't say overhyped, but there is hype, and it's going to be very hard to actually win a title. But he's going to deserve the shot at one
if he wins. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, I just wonder sometimes if some of these guys are hyped to a fault. In that, I mean, say Frampton has an off night against Cazares. Say he loses a decision. He deserves to lose a decision. Ordinarily, that would be no disgrace. But because of the levels of hype around him, and Frampton does seem to have his feet on the ground. Another gentleman, another great guy to talk to. But underneath it all, he will have been listening to this hype. He will have absolute, stone cold belief in himself. But if he was to lose to Cazares, because of these levels of expectation, is there a danger that could damage him?
Yeah,
Because he's got that air of invincibility. Nobody can beat me. Suddenly, when that's taken away from you, it can be very, very damaging.
Yeah, but sooner or later, everybody loses, and it's really all about how they react. How they respond to that. Whether they can come back, better, or have it, like you say, have their aura shattered sort of permanently and not improve from it. We do get. The positivity can get overcooked, and then you can be too negative. If someone loses a fight, that happens. It is a sport after all. But if Frampton loses, it would invariably swing the other way, and then suddenly lots of people would say, "Oh, he was overhyped. He was never that good." I think a sort of cooler heads should prevail, and that he's not unbeatable now. And nor if he lost would it be a disaster, but it probably wouldn't pan out that way. But I think in the main you want to start generating excitement if you can. So the hype for him is probably a good thing. It's just it's just up to him to not let it affect him. You know, to not, you know, to be realistic.
Yeah. No, I think good points. Good points again, John. Someone who has come back from defeats time and time again is Enzo Maccarinelli. Now, we have spoke about him on this podcast, and you know, I have been guilty of writing him off completely. I have also been guilty of suggesting that he should walk away from the game. You know, whether my opinion on that has changed, I'm not sure. But I'm fascinated by his fight against Jürgen Bremer for the WBO light heavyweight title at the weekend. I haven't seen anybody bar some ardent Maccarinelli followers, Maccarinelli himself and Gary Lockett, pick Enzo for the upset. What sort of chance does he have?
A puncher's chance.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like he is, you know, he is vulnerable, and like you're saying about, you know, we wanted to see him retire in the past because he'd suffered these really bad knockouts, and you know, I don't think we were knocking him by wanting him to retire. I think it was more, you know, for the best possible reasons. In that, and that, actually, we've been talking about a lot of nice guys in boxing, but Enzo is one of boxing's, you know, one of the nice guys of the sport, and we didn't like seeing him take those bad knockouts, and it looked like he really could be hurt. But himself, he doesn't stay down, does he? Like he keeps coming back, and he is dangerous, you know, in the ring. He can really bang, but he is going to Germany against a seasoned champion who's old, but you know, probably not past it yet. So he is going to be a big underdog.
It's an interesting one. I agree that he has got a puncher's chance. There's something interesting that Gary Lockett said as well, that if he can just believe in his jab, that he's going to land at least once cleanly, and that might be enough. My pace has probably quickened slightly because I can see red light flashing, which means that we've probably got seconds left. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you ever so much, John. Really enjoyed that, for chatting about all sorts of things about boxing. I won't be here next week. I'm afraid I'm going to be stuck in Las Vegas. Oh dear, worries me. So I suspect it will be yourself and Tris next week. So and I'll hopefully be allowed to return when I get back from Sin City. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
If you get back from Sin City.
Good point. Thank you for watching and listening, and remember to subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit the like button on Facebook. Comment or write a review on iTunes or Google Play. It only takes a minute, and it does loads to help us produce shows like these.